At some point you realize that we're all just like 98 cents worth of dust at the end of our lives. So I gotta tell you, I don't have a lot of regrets. It's kind of futile. You are what you are. I should start by saying ni hao.
Thank you very much for allowing me to interview you. It's really a pleasure for us.
It's my pleasure.
So, Guy, firstly, we are really curious that since we're sorry to hear that you lost your hearing. So how do you really conduct your interviews?
I use Zoom at Chrome because Chrome has live transcription. But that's not good enough because transcription is not fast enough and it's really not accurate enough. So I actually have a cochlear implant. It takes sound waves and it translates them into electrical pulses directly to my auditory nerve. So like if I plug this ear, it has no effect because this ear is destroyed anyway, so it doesn't matter. Arguably, I have the most efficient source of hearing because it goes immediately to electronic impulses as opposed to sound waves hitting the eardrum, getting translated and getting to the auditory nerve. So I should be faster than most people.
Yeah, you got to react faster. So that sounds more like Elon Musk thing, you know?
Well, Elon Musk is the last person in the world that I would let put anything in my head. I won't even drive his car, much less put his chip in my head.
Since once you were a brand ambassador for Mercedes-Benz, right?
Yes, yes.
So that question arrives us into the first opening question. So when you think of remarkable, so who do you say is the first person that comes to your mind and why? Because I learned that Harry Stebbings asked you this question once before about which one related to success that you would think of.
Yeah.
So at that time, you said Steve Jobs, but this is 2024.
Yeah. I think that remarkable people have gone through 3 stages in life. First, there's the growth stage where you learn new things and you accomplish new things. And then there's the grit stage, which is you find these new things and you pursue them, often for decades. And then the final stage is grace. Now you're not taking in, you're giving back. I would say Jane Goodall, because she's truly a graceful and gracious person. I can't say Steve Jobs was gracious.
Our audiences would argue like it's either Steve Jobs or Elon Musk.
You know, don't get me wrong, Steve Jobs is definitely remarkable. And he had his own, shall I say, unique form of grace. Elon Musk, on the other hand, I see no evidence of grace at all. So it's interesting that, in fact, he may exceed Steve Jobs because Steve just did computers, right? But Elon is doing cars, chips, tunnels, solar panels, space, satellite, internet service. But then in the last 2-3 years, man, I don't know what happened to that guy. I mean, maybe he should check the chip he has.
To become a more remarkable people, which is better for me as a founder of VC to get an MBA. Stanford, Haas, or UCLA.
Okay, I tell you something. I have an MBA from UCLA. I'm affiliated with UC Berkely. And Stanford rejected me. So, you know, now you know all the conflicts of interest, right? But I will tell you that to be a tech entrepreneur, an MBA is not necessary, nor it's sufficient. It's 2 years out of your life where you could be building your product or service. Now, if you were to tell me, I want to go into investment banking, private equity, hedge fund, management consulting, you know, something like that, I would say, go get an MBA. But if it's going to be a guy and a gal in a garage and they're starting the next tech company, not clear to me you should get an MBA. So the answer to your question is none.
Guess the best answer will be have more guy Kawasaki on board to be advisors, right?
Yeah, I can save you 2 years.
But which one did you recommend your son to go? To give us an insider opinion.
It's hard to beat the name recognition and prestige of Stanford, okay? And listen, I went to Stanford as an undergraduate, and I got in when, this is so long ago that being Japanese American helped you get into Stanford. So I have been living off the Stanford brand for my whole life because somehow, often irrationally, when people hear you went to Stanford, they automatically assume you're smart. That's not necessarily a good assumption. And what was I going to do? Tell them, no, you're wrong. I'm stupid. Just forget that I went to Stanford. But I will tell you that I think when all the dust settles, it really doesn't matter which of those 3 schools you went to. There's going to be many factors that determine the success or failure of a startup, particularly a tech startup. And the school that you went to is going to be way down the list. You don't even need to get a bachelor's anymore.
Yeah, especially with the help of AI these days.
Yeah, well, I mean, AI is the biggest change I have seen in my entire career. It's a bigger deal than personal computers, internet, social media combined. It's a game changer. And as a writer and a speaker, I use AI almost every day. It has definitely made me a better writer. And I am proud of that. To me, you have a moral responsibility to your readers to write the best book you possibly can, which is different than saying the best book you possibly can without help. I mean, when I read a book, it's not like I say, oh, this guy used ChatGPT. This book is not as good. I don't care where he got his information from. And the same way, computer graphics was coarse and, sort of not that great. And then it got better and better and better, right? You think I sit in the movie theater saying, this movie's not that great because they use CGI. Well, I don't care. If they made a great movie, they made a great movie.
Yeah. It was like when camera was firstly invented, people thought that, was that really a picture, right?
Yeah.
And now it's the era of AI. People start to doubt that again, but later on, maybe it's just a paradigm shift.
This is the mother of all paradigm shifts. And if you don't embrace AI, you're going to be way, way behind. You're going to have a fantastic disadvantage. It would be like if we could go back in time, some of you are going to refuse to use computers. You're only going to use manual typewriters and you're going to use slide rulers. Hard to imagine you're going to be successful.
Yeah, correct. So your good old friend Steve Jobs, he coined the term connected dots. So looking back, how do you see the dots connected in your own venture scene life, whether be it a VC or a founder?
Steve Jobs, once again, hits the nail on the head that you really only can connect dots looking backwards. And I think many people, frankly, between you and me, especially Asians, we think we can thread the needle and we can, pick the exact right preschool, the exact right elementary school, the right college prep, the right Ivy League, go to work for Goldman Sachs or McKinsey and, just thread the needle the whole way. And oh my God, that is such a fallacy. I'll give you a quick story of how I became from a lower middle class part of Honolulu to the podcaster I am today. So I came from, as I said, a kind of poor area of Hawaii, very diverse racially. And in elementary school, my 6th grade teacher told my parents to take me out of the public school system, put me into a college prep private school because I had too much potential to be in the public school system. Luckily, my parents listened to her. Luckily, my parents made the sacrifice to put me in that school. Then for some reason, which I honestly don't remember, I applied to Stanford. And then for some reason, I got into Stanford. I still don't know why. If I applied today, I wouldn't even get past the first cut. So I get into Stanford and I meet somebody and we become friends because we both love cars. Now, he came from a rich family, so he had cars. I just loved cars. I didn't own them. So now we're friends. A few years after he started at Apple at Macintosh, he recruits me. So I become successful at Apple as this evangelist. I get high visibility. And then out of the blue, 10, 15 years later, the woman who runs TEDx Palo Alto, she sends me an email and says, Guy, I'm familiar with your work because I'm a Macintosh user. Jane Goodall is going to do an on-stage appearance for us at TEDx Palo Alto. Would you come on stage and be the interviewer? Ha! Pinch me. You want me to interview Jane Goodall at TEDx? So I, of course, do that. I become very good friends with Jane. And so when I started my podcast, who better to be your very first guest than Jane Goodall?
Yeah, actually.
The long and the short of it is, the reason why I had Jane Goodall on my podcast, and she becomes my friend to this day, we just talked last week, because a 6th grade teacher in Honolulu, Hawaii, told my parents to put me into a different school. That's connecting the dots, looking backwards. One of the lessons that I want to impress upon people the most is that if you are a teacher or a coach or a mentor and you help people make this kind of decision, I hope you understand the magnitude of the impact you can have on a life. That sixth grade teacher changed my life.
And luckily, your Asian parents usually put great financial resources into their children's education. So luckily we have Asian parents.
Sometimes.
Sometimes.
Or most times.
Yeah. So Guy, did you enjoy to be a venture capitalist?
No.
You were an advisor? No.
I did not enjoy being a venture capitalist. I don't think I was good at it. For one thing, it's not clear to me. I think it's more luck than anything else. And part of being a venture capitalist is, in a year you get, 12,000 plans and you say yes 20 times. Okay. And of those 20 times, 18 die. So if you look at the scorecard, it's, maybe I'm exaggerating, but it's 2 or 3 out of 12,000. And then if you look at the 3 that are successful, you can say, yeah, I knew those 3 were going to be successful. But then if you're intellectually honest and somebody asks you, well, if you knew these 3 would be successful, why did you bet on those 17 if you're so smart? And what most venture capitalists will tell you is, I told my stupid partners not to do those deals, not me. I only picked the 3 winners. That's just luck.
Yeah.
You spend your whole life saying no.
Since now there are a lot of solo GPs, so they don't have this kind of excuse anymore.
Well, you know what? All these entrepreneurs are using LLMs to help them make their pitches, right? Believe it or not, I have an LLM built on ChatGPT called Kawasaki GPT. And Kawasaki GPT contains all my writing and the transcripts from my podcasts. So all you entrepreneurs out there, if you want advice from Guy Kawasaki, I can tell you how. Go to Kawasaki GPT and ask the question. And I promise you, Kawasaki GPT is better at being Guy than Guy. And I bet you it'll give you a pretty good analysis, at least as good an analysis as an intern who is getting an MBA.
Now you're getting Guy Kawasaki for free.
I'll tell you a funny story. So I have this new book coming out, right? Think Remarkable. So I made an offer online that if anybody buys 25 copies of the book, I'll review your pitch and spend half an hour with you. And lots of people are taking me up on that. But I could make the case. They could just go to Kawasaki GPT, stick their PowerPoint in, and probably get the same or better advice for free in 30 seconds.
Okay, no taken.
But you're still as the chief evangelist of Apple and now a chief evangelist of Canva. You still choose that kind of job.
Yeah, well, this is called Guy's Golden Touch. And Guy's Golden Touch is not that whatever I touch turns to gold. Guy's Golden Touch is whatever is gold, Guy touches. And so Macintosh and Apple was gold. Fast forward 30-something years and Canva is gold. When people ask me, it's like, what have you done? I tell them Macintosh and Canva. Nobody ever walks away saying, what a loser. Now, if you dig one level deeper, you would say, okay, so that's 30 years. What happened in the intermediate 30 years? That's when I didn't touch gold.
When the low-hanging fruits are gone.
I don't know if there are any more low-hanging fruits. In case you ever want to impress somebody, on a biological, sort of botanical nature metaphor, low-hanging fruits is a bad analogy. If you look at a fruit tree, the fruits that ripen first are the high-hanging fruits because they get the sun. So yes, a low-hanging fruit is easier to pick, but it's not ripe.
Got it. Next time I'll choose wisely the term to use. So aside from your venture scene career, so you were also a well-known author, speaker, and podcaster. And we can really resonate that as a content creators ourselves about the process of engaging with guests, doing a bit of research, preparing the question list, or actually doing the recording. After that, editing, releasing, right, and producing. So first, in terms of engaging, so what is really the magic sauce for you to get so many remarkable people on your podcast, especially those who really deliberately keep in low profile? Because I don't really doubt that there is anyone who refused to be on your podcast.
Well, actually, there have been people who refuse to be on my podcast. There's two kinds of decline. So one is, I don't want to be on your dumbass podcast, guy. The other kind is, I just am too busy to do it. But we will never know the truth. I like to explain podcasting, at least the kind that I do, with 3 circles. I believe that everything can be explained in either a 2x2 matrix, top 10 format, tricolon, or Venn diagram. So I'm going to use a Venn diagram. If you draw one circle and you say, this is the group of people who have access to remarkable people like Jane Goodall. It's because they know Jane or Jane knows of them or somehow they have credibility with Jane and her people. And then you draw another circle. And in this circle, you not only have to have the credibility, but you actually need to know what to ask. Because there's a lot of podcasters who they don't know what to ask. They're not quick enough on their feet to like make a decision. I'm going to ask about this because this person went down this path. And then the third circle is who has the courage to ask the question. So if you draw those 3 circles, there's not a lot of people in those 3.
Yeah.
And I'm in there. I'm right in there in the center. That's why I think I love podcasting. And I think podcasting loves me. It's not as easy as press record and go on Zoom. But I would tell you, and maybe you'll agree or not, everything is hard. But to me, the hardest part of podcasting is getting people to listen and subscribe. Right. I can honestly tell you, I don't have the answer for that.
Yeah, people tend to underestimate the work of podcast.
Yeah.
People still don't understand, how can podcast be a full-time job? People ask me that question as well.
It's definitely a full-time job.
I'm so curious about your podcast process. So could you elaborate a bit more on how you would tailor content to the remarkable guests? Because obviously they are most from different fields.
Yeah, and especially like they have their own language, they have their own domain knowledge, right?
I probably prep 4 to 5 hours for every episode. Many times the guest is coming on with a new book, so I have to read the new book. And when I start an interview, typically I have a sheet of paper with 20 to 30 questions ready to go. I have just stacks and stacks of all the questions I've asked everybody, organized, and I've kept them because I thought maybe someday if my podcast becomes really successful, it's kind of like going through the presidential papers, right? And like, what was Abe Lincoln thinking? People are going to go through this stack and say, we can get a window into Guy, how he was thinking when he interviewed Jane Goodall. Or it's just going to be recycled paper.
Give it to me. Please deliver it to me.
So I read their book. I read all their things. I watch their other videos. I do all that. But I will tell you that, and I cannot exactly tell you how, it just appears in my head to ask people questions that nobody else asks. I think a lot of it is that people don't prepare enough. Like I do 52 a year. That's probably more than most people, but it's not them. How many do you do a week?
Twice a week.
Okay, so you're twice as hard a worker as I am. Now, for me, I interview convicted felons who are becoming artists. I interview Stephen Wolfram, MacArthur Fellow for Physics. And then I interview someone who is a shark expert. Yeah. And then I interview someone who is an abused woman. And it's like every week is completely different, right? Yeah. And I have to have enough knowledge so that I can ask like very specific questions. That's the challenge. And I don't know why, but I can do it. It's just the way my brain works. That separates, podcasters from each other. And like a lot of times you listen to podcasts, and I hate when the podcast interviewer does 80% of the talking. So like on my podcast, it's 95-5. I do 5% of the talking. And I listen to some of these podcasts and it's like, so when you were 8, you saw your father kill your mother in front of you. You saw both of them covered in blood and the police take your father away. And this led for you to go into a foster home, and then you went into juvenile detention. And then after all this, the interviewer says, so did the death of your mother at the hands of your father, did that affect you? Well, duh. I mean, what's the guy going to say? No, I've gotten over it. It was 50 years ago. No biggie. Next to the question. I mean, they repeat the whole thing, and then they ask you, so how did you feel? What was it like? Did this affect you badly? I mean, what stupid questions.
So far, could you rate our style of interview questions from a grade to 1
You
to
are
10?
prepared. I give you that. You are prepared. And, you're not asking me questions like, so, guy, you started at Apple in 1983. You were the second software evangelist. Your job was to convince people to write Macintosh software and develop Macintosh hardware. You worked for Mike Boich, who was the first software evangelist. You were in a division led by Steve Jobs. And Steve Jobs is known as an innovator with emphasis on elegance of design. What was it like? Spend 20 minutes describing everything and then ask me the stupid softball question.
Luckily, we didn't.
Do you have some favorite questions that you would like to ask everyone?
I don't have that. I know there are people who have that. Like they ask everybody, what's a time in your life that you failed, or what's a time in your life that you were the most depressed, or something like that. I don't have standard questions like that. Maybe I should, but I pride myself in having questions so specific and so pertinent that nobody has ever asked that question before, which is very different than like a stupid question like, well, how does snapping your spinal cord affect your lifestyle? I mean, that's such a dumbass question, right? I'll give you a little secret. My very first question of every interview, I try to make it a question that the guest listens to and sometimes even verbalizes it, at least says to himself or herself, holy shit, guy is really prepared. This ain't gonna be one of those softball interviews where somebody handed him my Wikipedia entry and he just read it 30 seconds before we got on, and he's asking me these dumbass softball questions. He's asking me about my senior year in high school, when my father made me pick up the snapping turtle that was about to bite my hand off and throw it in the back of the truck. And how did that influence my ability to sell my pumpkins to Walmart in Bentonville, Arkansas, 10 years later? And that's not something you got from Wikipedia. That's something where you really, like, I tell you, I interviewed Neil deGrasse Tyson, right? So my first question is, how come Johnny was not named after a moon of Saturn, unlike the other two who were named, whatever. And I want Neil deGrasse Tyson to say to himself, holy shit, guy really did research. I mean, he knows that I named my kids after the moons of Saturn, except for one. No one has ever asked me that before. So for the rest of the interview, the person is thinking, oh man, I gotta be on the top of my game, because this is not one of those, what's it like to be an astronomer? Do you wonder if there's life in outer space?
I'm sorry that I forget what's your son's name.
I have 3, Nick, Noah, and Nate.
Okay, I remember it. And actually, we have some stupid favorite question, and we will ask you later.
Okay.
And now let's come back to the remarkable people. And after releasing over 200 episodes, do you see some patterns? What common mindset or motivation seems to drive them?
Listen, if I didn't see common mindsets and motivations and patterns, I couldn't write the book, because it would be 200 random data points. So basically, the book is divided into 3 parts: growth, grit, and grace. So those are the 3 common patterns that I noticed over and over again. So that's how the book's organized. And within those 3 sections, there's really 88 techniques to make a difference and be remarkable. Because I gotta tell you, I do not like books where they do one topic for 300 pages. Yeah. And I don't think that your generation, they're gonna read 300 pages to understand one thing. If your listeners buy this book, there's 88 methods in there. Often the methods conflict with each other because part of being a remarkable person is you can hold contradictory thoughts in your head. Like life is not that simple where there's always A, B, and you pick A or B. This will save you a lot of time and effort. Think of it as kind of a manual for life, and not in a preachy sense, but this is really tactical and practical. It's like, some books say like, you need to be a visionary. You got to be innovative. Well, thank you very much. You just spent 300 pages telling me I need to be innovative. Exactly how do I get innovative product ideas? And that's what my book does. My book gives you techniques how to get the idea, not the beauty of having innovative thoughts.
That's why it's a pocket pamphlet, so that people get to carry it and read once in a while.
I don't know if I can say, I don't know if this is a good joke or a bad joke, but this is like the capitalist manifesto. This is going to help you create great stuff. This is the little black book.
The black book. Okay. Regarding AI, so could you honestly tell us, so what is division of labor between you, your co-author Madison, and your co-author AI?
Okay, this book has taken about 1.5 years to write. The first 6 to 9 months was purely me making the outline. I don't just dive in stream of conscious. I need to know where everything is going. If you're building a building, you need an architect. You don't start building stuff and saying, I'm going to change this later. I need an entire architectural plan, environmental statement, everything. I need everything laid out in my brain. And then I start writing, and I use AI and Madison as like the world's best research assistants. For example, one of the examples I highlight is the growth of Julia Child, the French chef. So, believe it or not, she started her career as a spy. And she went from being a spy working for the organization that became the CIA to living in France for the CIA or OSS. And then she fell in love with French cooking, and that's why Julia Child is Julia Child, okay? When I was writing the book and doing the outline, I saw this pattern of people make really big career changes who are remarkable. And when you write a book, you want a balance of examples that nobody has ever heard of, but you also need examples of people who they have heard of. So it's comfortable and, they're aware of this and it's credible. So I went to ChatGPT and I said, give me 6 examples of people who have made major career changes. And ChatGPT spit off 6 examples. Jeff Bezos, he was an investment banker. He started selling books at Amazon. And one of the examples was Julia Child. And I read that and I didn't notice. I thought Julia Child grew up in a rich household and they had a French chef. So she learned how to cook French food from her father or mother chef. Who knows? But that's not her story at all. So I read that and I said, this is a great story for my book. So then I tell Madison GPT, I say, Madison, ChatGPT, make shit up. You got to go research this. I need to know that Julia Child really did make this kind of career change because I'm going to put this in my book and I don't want people telling me, guy, you're so stupid. ChatGPT made shit up and you wrote it down and you put it in. So over and over again, Madison GPT backed up ChatGPT. Well, she does many things because there's a lot of things to writing a book besides just typing in the text. She is a balance to me because I'm 69 years old and she's 25. This book is meant for people who are 25, not 69. I needed her perspective that if I keep using examples like Julia Child, she and other people would tell me, Guy, you know what? I hate to tell you, but yes, all you boomers, you know who Julia Child is, but nobody in high school knows who Julia Child is. They were not born yet on 9/11. So if you're using these 9/11 examples, they're wondering, like, is he talking about a Porsche? And so I needed young person like Madison to balance me off.
That's really nice combo that you have with Madison.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that there are 3 sections of Think Remarkable in your book: growth, grit, and grace. So I'm curious about which stage of these 3 is more difficult for you in your personal development.
Well, first, I think grace has been the easiest. When you get to be 60, 70 years old, all the crap has been beaten out of you. So it gets easier. I would say the grit phase was probably the hardest. It just takes dedication and it just takes not giving up. I don't want to paint you an overly dramatic picture that I overcame crushing poverty or, that I was imprisoned and I had to change my life or my parents were crack addicts or anything like that. So I don't have that kind of dramatic story, but I did work my ass off.
What do you want to be remembered for?
When I die, I want people to say that I helped them make a difference. I helped them make a difference with Think Remarkable. I helped them make a difference with Remarkable People podcast. I helped them make a difference with my speeches, my writing, my investing, my advising. That's what I want. And on my gravestone, I wanted to say, he empowered people.
That's powerful and succinct.
I only need 3 words.
So this comes to our last section, which is the stupid question that we ask every time. So what would you tell your younger self, say, just upon graduating from university?
Don't quit Apple. No, actually, it's an interesting but not a question I pay attention to much in my real life because A, you cannot go back in time and change stuff. And B, getting back to the concept of connecting the dots, you cannot rearrange the dots either. And so, maybe if I had not quit law school or maybe if I had not quit Apple, I would not have had this experience of starting companies. I would not have become a podcaster. Who knows what would have been wrong, right? No. So in that sense, it's kind of futile. You are what you are, and you should just worry about what you're gonna do with your remaining years.
Yeah, let's cut the Asian fallacies.
Yeah.
Have your priority changed?
Well, my priorities have definitely changed because I keep score differently now. The way I keep score is, have I empowered people? Have I raised my children right? I used to keep score in very different ways in terms of money and, influence and power and all that kind of stuff. But at some point you realize that we're all just like 98 cents worth of dust at the end of our lives. So I gotta tell you, I don't have a lot of regrets. And it's not because I have not done anything wrong, nor that I have been so smart as to have done everything right. But I have just been so fortunate. And I have not had like this major screw ups or these major issues. What can I say? I'm lucky.
So as we, YUVC, is on a mission to use curated media to personalize the venture experience with a vision to finally perhaps raise our own fund. So to really for us to make a difference and become remarkable. So what would you say the first step for us?
I think what separates VCs and VCs who truly add value is that they have been there and done that. It's not just because they worked one summer at McKinsey or Goldman Sachs that all of a sudden they're a financial whiz. It's that they built companies, they funded companies, they hired people, they fired people, they laid off people, they got shut down, they expanded. I think the best VC has actually gone through the experience that they are coaching their portfolio to do. It seems to me you're a little young to have gone through all that shit. So that may be the challenge.
To read your book.
Yeah, but at least you realize you should read my book. You should read The Art of the Start 2.0 because that's really about entrepreneurship and venture capital. But for life, especially outside the US, and you want to understand how the US and the West Coast and Silicon Valley really works, you really should read Think Remarkable.
Yes, we will, definitely.
All right. Thank you very much. What is that black thing that's clipped to both of you right here?
Oh, this one. It's actually made in China, and it's called MoMA. I recommend you later.
It's a microphone?
Yeah, it's a microphone. It's more expensive than Rode.
It's more expensive than Rode? In China?
Come on.
Wow. What kind of camera do you use?
We actually use a Sony.
Which one?
FX30.
You're using an FX30?
Yes.
Holy shit. And is it streaming HDMI?
Well, I just plugged it as, like an external camera for this video.
Yeah.
And I just record the screen so it captures everything as we record.
You record the screen. So
Yes.
it's not writing to the camera itself?
No, actually. It's actually easier for our post-production if we just record the screen directly.
Okay, I have interviewed and been interviewed hundreds of times.
Yeah.
You use an FX30. That just blows my mind. What lens do you have on it?
You know, just to make our heads smaller. So we use a 16 millimeter.
Wow,
That
I
blows
gotta
my
look
mind.
at an FX3. Your picture is really beautiful. I'm
Thanks.
using a Sony, I think A6700 or something.
Okay, yeah. Go purchase FX30. It's much cheaper than FX3, but like the image quality isn't really inferior.
Yeah, I mean, you have a different theory in lighting too, right?
We have this external lighting because like when we started, it's 100% dark outside. So without external lighting, we're dark. And now it's over 7 o'clock. It just turned bright outside. So
Yeah, so I have two studios and I keep them pitch black too because I don't want to have to worry about what time of day I'm recording, right? So it's always dark where I record.
that's like the Lex Friedman show, right? It's always like he's recording a dark room.
Yeah, man, I may have to buy an FX30. I really like
Do it,
this.
do it.
Or-
Support Sony, being a proud Japanese American.
Yeah, well, I was thinking of buying a A7R5, but FX30 it's purely for video, right?
It's purely for video. You could capture photos with it. It's just really tailored for video. And you can record it non-stop, literally. Because it has a fan, so to keep it cool.
Oh.
So you can directly, buy an external battery, directly plugs into the electricity so that it does not run out of
Wait, so
electricity.
do you have a dummy battery or there's no dummy battery? You plug right in?
There's like a dummy battery,
Oh.
which directly plugs into the electricity. So literally, like people use it to live streaming non-stop 24/7. You can do it with that.
And I can use any of the E-mount series?
Yeah, it's E-mount, right?
And how much is an FX30? Like 4,000?
No. It's when I purchased it was like half a year ago, and it costs like 11k RMB. So by translating that into US dollars, it's like 1,600.
Oh, that's not bad.
$1,600. That's really good.
That's less than a A7,
Well, A7 nowadays is getting cheaper a lot. So
but not that cheaper.
yeah. Okay, guys.
Well,
so
I'm gonna go look at an FX30. I really
Yeah,
like
definitely.
your picture.
okay, so I would say this the biggest takeaway that you get from us from the podcast.
Hey, but you know what? I mean, at least I shows I have an open mind, right? A.
Yeah.
And B, how many people have you interviewed that have ever asked you about your camera?
You're the first one.
Okay. And then when asked about your camera and you said FX30, how many people do you think could say, oh, you use an FX30 and know what
None.
it is?
None.
None, right?
Really impressed me.
Right.
You're one of a kind.
That's why I am who I am.